So I'll call the Wenham Finance Committee meeting to order at 6:32. And we'll do a brief roll call of attendees for Catherine Tinsley, Jim Purdy,
Susan Malin.
Harry Jelsma.
David Molitano.
All right, and I will call to order the Hamilton Finance and Advisory Committee. Do a roll call vote, starting with, why don't we start with you, David?
Dave Wanger.
Nick Tenson.
Christina Schenk-Hargrove.
Valerie McCormick.
And John Prulich, so all 5 members are present.
John, do you just want to, could we just run through the agenda to make sure we're all on the same page?
Sure, yeah.
Oh, okay. So this is what John and I discussed last week. Excuse me. A review of the shared services budgets, library, inspectional services, and the rec department. And a review of the school budget and the impact on the town's operating budget and the proposed budgets for 22. And the final one I have, John, is discussions regarding considerations for regionalization, collaboration efforts into the future.
There was also a line item about mutual capital planning initiatives.
Yes, I have that in my notes here, long-range capital planning initiatives too, as part of the future collaboration.
Right, exactly. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I had that, sorry.
Okay.
So John and I are going to kind of co-chair this. So I think the first agenda item, John, will be the library presentation and an update on the capital plan for the roof and the solar system.
That's right.
Is that okay to move with that?
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. A great place to start.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Kim, do you want to update us on that and the finance folks that are on, Jamie Colin, Marissa, Jackie? I know you're part of that subcommittee that's been working on this going in the past and going forward. So whoever would like to lead on that discussion, that'd be great.
I think we're going to let Kim lead on this one.
Do you want me to start with the roofing business?
I think that makes sense. Yep.
I can give you an update for where we are. So in the good news department, just grab I did find the roof warranties. I did get the original documentation. So it's only taken me 2 years to find them, but I have put my hands on them. I have them. So a couple of pieces of news on that front. So the shingle roof, the work was done originally in 2001 by Titan Roofing. They guaranteed their work for 1 year. The warranty on the actual roof was a 15-year warranty that expired in 2016. There is a 40-year manufacturer's warranty on the shingles. So I am in the process. I called the company that manufactured the shingles to inquire about how we would go about filing a claim. I started the claim online. We now have to do some further forms to fill out. We have to mail them actual shingles that have come off the roof. I have to mail them photographs. Marissa and folks in Hamilton have been helping me. We have to prove that we own the building. We had to produce the original building permit for the library. So I'm hoping either tomorrow or Friday to have all that mailed to the company that originally manufactured the shingles to see if there's any money that would come back to us in product. It wouldn't be the installation of the shingle roof. It would just be in the actual shingles themselves. I don't know. The gentleman on the phone was helpful, but they couldn't tell me a yes or a no on whether they would give us any money, but I figure it's worth a shot. We might as well try. So that's the status so far of the shingle roof. the flat rubber roof that we share with the rec center, which was the primary target of the solar project. So I did find the warranty on that. That is a 20-year warranty. It is good until October of this year. So I called Firestone, who holds the warranty. They put me in touch with a list of licensed roofers that are certified by Firestone to do warranty work. I have 2 phone calls in to 2 different companies to see who will answer me first to come out and look at that roof. And then they will give us a report on what repairs, if any, are still covered under that 20-year warranty. So we're waiting on that as well to see what they will pay for before we put any kind of money into that. So that's as much as I've got so far as an update from before. Don't know if I can try to answer some questions on that front.
David, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Just a quick thing. Do we need to have an attorney involved right away to write those letters to put more force behind it? I found previously when you have a letter with a law firm at the top, it seems to get better response. And have we thought about that, since a lot of these warranties, a lot of people, they get denied at first and then you have to fight back, that if we came out with a stronger footing, that may help us. I don't know if that's been discussed or we thought about it.
Not from my end. I don't know if anyone from the town side wants to.
I mean, we'd
Okay.
be more than happy, David, oh, there you are. I'd be more than happy to work with Kim, working with our councils, if we want to basically have them pursue it on a stronger account.
I don't think, I think it would be worth a few $100 for a letter
Sure.
coming up, since we're speaking of thousands of dollars, so the payback is there. So I think it's worth exploring. I don't know if I'm the only one who thinks of that.
I
Well, I
don't think it's just worth exploring, David. I think it's worth
Doing,
pursuing.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it can't hurt. It
No.
can probably help.
Do we have, if we go this route, we don't know what the offsets might be. That's a complete unknown in terms of any
Well,
reimbursement.
it would be, I'm thinking just in past things too, that you take the life of the loan, the life of the warranty and the cost, and gets amortized over a number of years. So I don't know if it's a full replacement or not, but it would be a partial cost. But have we reviewed the actual warranty itself? Does it say full replacement or replacement value or actual cost?
You're on the right trail, David. There's like a ratio, like you
Yeah.
said, of how old it, like your car, it depreciates
Yeah.
over the course of years. And even when I called them, like I said, they couldn't give me a dollar amount. They would have to look at the original installation and they inspect the shingles themselves. And then if there was anything that they felt they owed us, they would write us a check for that amount.
Okay.
In a very basic explanation.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? The iPad's falling, excuse me. That makes sense. They're not going to make any promises over the phone. So, okay. So I guess we have to see whose counsel would write the letter. Would it be Hamilton or probably Wenham's, right? Because we're the lead in this specific sharing agreement.
Yep.
Okay.
It's fine. Kim, if you can in the next 2 days, because I've been kind of tied up in some other matters of late here, but I think they've been wrapped up today. If you can send them, you and I can just spend a few minutes, tell me, getting me the materials, and I can get them right off to council either today, tomorrow, or Friday.
Okay.
And pursuing that. I mean, one thing I'd love to do during my tenure here, and Kim, I really appreciate you finding them. That was great. I'm glad you were playing kind of where's Waldo with our warranties here. But I would love to work with our facilities director and basically centralize, make sure, I'm sure he has some centralized files, but they all should be in one particular place
Right.
versus in the, in the library department or somewhere else, so they're easily accessible.
I have talked to Mike Hardy a little bit. We are getting some things digitized as well that haven't been digitized before. We're getting all of our architectural drawings digitized, so we're hoping to have
Fantastic.
some more streamlined things.
I have a quick question about kind of sequencing this. Is it worth doing a first pass with the claim without legal help, or is it worth it to go ahead and do it now? And I'm just speaking from personal experience with lower dollar amounts. We always did a first pass before we upped our game and how we were going to handle it.
The one thing that KP Law has is they have expertise in construction law and construction attorneys that basically go beyond me putting a few screws and nails in at my house. So I have a tendency to go along with what David had recommended is let's pursuing that there, because we also have only a limited amount of time before town meetings and such. So I'd rather maybe skip steps 1 and 2 to get to step 3.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Karen.
Alex, did you have your hand up?
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I did. Thanks. Just 2 quick things. One, first, Kim, that was excellent, that update. Thank you very much. Concise and it seems like short of putting a ladder on the, on the building and climbing up there yourself and grabbing some shingle samples, you've done. Really just one question with respect to the solar proposed project. At what point, I suspect not this evening, but at what point will we engage in discussions as to the details of that proposal to help come to a determination as to whether or not solar makes sense? I trust it's not a foregone conclusion that we're going solar on the roof, but I'm seeing by a couple of blank expressions that other people may feel differently. So where are we with that?
Right.
Um,
There's been discussions. I don't have anything further to go with that one right at this point, Alex, because right now I'm trying to focus on what the warranties may provide and whether if the warranties provide a certain thing, whether it means it's restricted to us not putting solar on there at that time, at this time. So trying to see. Yeah.
There's some rubber roofing that, depending on how it's laid down or what it has, you can't put anything on top of it. You can't puncture it. So if you want solar, it may dictate what you have as a base.
I'm really sorry, my internet, it gives out at the worst time, right? You ask a question and
That's all right.
answer. So who knows? I missed everything in response, but I don't want to derail us now. Someone can bring me up to speed, or is that, I take it that's a discussion that we have later?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess, so we're going to go down the track of looking at the warranties, getting that information. Are we still basically, I mean, we have to allocate some dollars at town meeting, et cetera, but are we still basically on the same time frame track? Are we still thinking, was it latter part of the summer, in the fall, to try to get this project started?
I believe that's what we had all talked about back in the day. We've had 3 different roofing companies come in, at least for the shingle roof, and tell us how bad the shingle roof is. We have 3 different reports stating that it's in a failure state. So that one to me is pretty desperate. And I know the dollar amount is huge, and that's a big consideration. I understand that. And I'm very curious what comes out of this warranty work and trying to get it in under the gun before it expires with the flat roof.
Kim, what is the dollar amount on the shingle roof?
Let me grab I don't have the breakdown per town. Sorry, wrong folder.
I don't care about the breakdown per town. And is it just shingles, or is it underlayment, or what's in the quote?
I believe it is everything. Mike Hardy, our facilities director, got the quotes.
225, Kim, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I'm just grabbing the one sheet that we did.
I think it was 225 and 85 was the two
Yep.
quotes.
Yep, Sean's got it.
225 and 85 what? What's the
225,
split?
225 for the shingle and 85 for the rubber was the quote that was the low quote that we got.
It's about 315, and I remember somewhere in that neighborhood from the total figure.
Total,
Okay,
yeah.
Yeah, and Wenham has voted $70,000 at our last meeting. Is that right? Members?
75.
75, I think.
75, okay,
Yeah.
75,000.
where'd the 75,000 come from?
That was part of our capital allocation that we voted on at the fall meeting, Susan.
So that wasn't based on a quote?
That was both based on an informal estimate from the prior year.
Okay,
And
I-
so that
don't-
money is, correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, that money is still sitting in our budget, if you will, to be allocated towards this capital project. What our share would be roughly, I'll say 36%, something like that, of the total cost. Is that fairly accurate, John?
Yeah, I think that's
64-36, something like something. in that.
exactly. I think ours was somewhere in the 40-45 range.
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Kim, you mentioned that there is that they've said that the roof is not, I don't know, the word isn't damaged, but that the roof is in bad shape. Are they talking about the shingles are in bad shape? Underneath it is in bad shape?
The
Is it-
underlayment, yeah, that's the question.
And honestly, I couldn't answer that. I apologize. I can't answer that part of the question. That's something I'd have to defer to my facilities manager on, and because I wasn't present for the evaluation of the underlaying decking. I know we've picked up over 80 shingles that have blown off that roof in the last 6 months. So I don't know whether the failure is in the actual gluing of the shingles, if it's in the plywood underdecking. That's a little beyond my skill set, but I can find out.
Okay,
The reason I'm asking is because you've only got the shingles to deal with, correct? That's the only short-term liability there might be between now and October.
Right, exactly.
And I guess the question becomes, if that has deteriorated to some degree, are they responsible for the damage that is caused because of that? And that's the shingles went bad. Well, then they caused damage. So is that because normally the wood decking is fine and that you just put on top. So something sounds like it's more serious in terms of the damage done.
And I think that's what also have to determine what the warranty covers, because whether this was an installation issue, whether it was an equipment issue, whether it was a shingle issue, those things would have to be determined.
The other thing
Jackie?
I was thinking about was we're talking about putting solar up, and I don't know if it's appropriate in terms of the orientation, but I think you can get solar shingles. And so I don't know if that is it's something we should look into as an alternative, if the orientation is correct with the sun. But again, that would be, what does that cost versus the other? There's an analysis that needs to be done. But it's a thought.
Jackie, you have your hand up? Oh, I thought you had it.
No, Jim, I'm sorry, I don't. Thank you for noticing anyway.
May I raise a question? In addition to the warranty issue, has anyone given thought to ascertaining what the problem was physically with the roof, the shingles, the installation, the glue, and getting some legal opinion as to liability of the vendors.
It seems like that's where we might next venture, right? I mean, Certainteed is one of the top shingle manufacturers. And so presumably we would hope stand by their material. But I think the installation and the way in which this was done back, 2000, whatever the year was, roughly 20 years ago, is really what's at question. I think, David, we don't know that yet, but it could well be that these are flying off the roof owing to the design and implementation or implementation of getting that roof in place.
Right, so we would need some kind of an analysis, and then it would be a cost benefit calculation. Since I don't think an attorney would take this kind of case on as a contingency, it either would be covered by retainer or it would be an hourly endeavor. So we need to know, as Nick asked, what the problem was, and then if it points to any arguable liability by anyone.
John?
Oh, no, I was just going to say that I think starting with a lawyer's letter probably then makes more sense, because it's not just necessarily a warranty claim. It could even be something that's out of warranty.
Sorry guys, I can just jump in real quick. I was just going through my email, so I do have, we can forward it along to everyone, but the actual quote from the roofing company. So it looks like it's just the replacement of the shingles. So it doesn't look like there's any structural work to being done. So we can get that off to whomever needs to see it.
So there's no underlayment been called out?
From what I can read on the quote, it just looks like it's the replacement of the shingles.
Because if they used an oriented strand board rather than plywood, oriented strand board, when it gets wet, just basically decomposes and turns into sponge. And that may be why all of these shingles are flying off. They have nothing to attach themselves to.
So Tom, where's Tom?
I'm right here.
Oh, so we're going to pursue a letter from our KP Law. Did I understand that correctly?
Correct.
Okay. And so should we connect with that, getting back to David's comments about, having information for KP Law that defines the problem, the structural, the warranty issue, so they have something to kind of work with a letter? Would that make some sense?
Yes, it's obviously also one thing, and Kim and I will work together on this. But I mean, obviously, if we have times and dates of incidents, things like that would also be helpful going forward.
Oh, okay.
And that might be tough because some of this may have occurred before Kim was in charge and before I was here. So that may be a little tough to get a hold of, but any information we have would be helpful.
I have all the repair records for that. We went through all the bills and found that. It looks like most of it was done prior to 2016 when the warranty ran out. There was some work that was done in 2018, I believe, right? After the warranty had ran out, they had replaced some missing shingles up there in 2018, and it was paid for I believe out of our state aid funding money, but I can double check that.
Okay, so just trying to move this along a bit. So you guys will work on that, talk to KP Law, get together the information that's needed to support our letter to KP Law can support their letter to the contractors, and we'll move on that front.
Absolutely.
Okay. Are there questions, or Kim, do you want to review your operational budget? Just so we hear that together.
Sure.
It's pretty straightforward this year.
Yeah, we're pretty close. We're within what, $19 of where we were last year.
Yeah, great. Wow. That's
So
impressive.
was the goal, was a tight one.
Wow.
So the salary line was slightly increased to FY22. As we had talked about with the union negotiations, went very well with my staff. They are taking 0% increases for 22 and 23.
Wow.
So that definitely has helped us in not having a huge budgetary increase. I did include during our closure during the pandemic and our reopening, we did lose 3 part-time staff members who for health reasons just chose not to come back. And we haven't filled those 3 positions. And we also have not had our minimum wage shelvers back in the building since COVID hit. So in that support staff line that you see, I did include the possibility of bringing back or hiring 2 additional part-time staff and bringing back a couple of our shelvers. That's included in 22 in hopes that we're back to something of a normal schedule in terms of letting people inside the building again. So that's the salary piece of it. Everything else is pretty close to being the same. There's a small increase in the library books or materials line. That's because of our requirement that we have to spend 16% of our budget on materials. So when the Board of Library Commissioners looks at us for certification, they like to see a small increase in that line every year. A lot of that these days is going to databases and electronic resources. They continue to be what drives a lot of circulation, especially when people can't get here or don't feel safe enough to come out. So we've put a lot of work into that since March, increasing our online presence. And everything else is pretty similar. I don't know if there's comments or questions about anything that remains.
I have a comment. Are you willing to lend your services to the schools in terms of their bargaining?
I was thinking the same thing.
we had a really good team between Tom and Joe and Jackie and Anthony, and my staff were phenomenal. I think they really understood the big picture of what's actually happening here. So credit to a lot of people for that.
And credit to you. Wow. You're the magic woman somehow.
Okay, John, you want to kick it over to you for the rec department? You want to lead that discussion?
May I just
Sure.
ask a question on the library before we move
I'm
on?
sorry.
Oh, sure.
I was just wondering if there's been any calculations on the assessment.
Hi, Marissa, it's Jamie. No, there hasn't right now. I'm working on that, and then I'll give you preliminary.
Okay, thank
And then
you.
I'll send that along to everybody else too. You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And is the formula the same for all of the shared programs?
For the most part, there are some differences between some of the programs, but since the town of Wenham is the lead community on the library, then we have the calculations on the health insurance, which is based on what their rates are, and so
gotcha.
it wouldn't be something that it would be the same between the 2 towns. We normally do the recreation, and the recreation is based on the rates from the town of Hamilton. So I was just wondering if there was a preliminary calculation on the assessment so that we could include on the town of Hamilton's budget.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
In terms of rec, I don't know, Sean, if you want to maybe give some highlights, and I know Christina was the liaison to that group. If she's got any thoughts or notes on that for that presentation, but
Yeah, sure, no, not a problem.
It's more differences from last year, and
yeah. So normally what I normally do is kind of start with the general fund budget and then move to the revolving fund budgets. and go over those. So I'm not exactly sure which documents everyone has or got. I know I tried to get as many out to kind of the folks that would distribute them to the board. So, I usually we're doing this in person, so it's a little bit easier to do it that way.
Ron, excuse me. If there's one, I have all 6 documents that you sent. So if there's one you'd like on the screen to be shared, I can certainly do that for you.
Perfect. Can you do I think the easiest one for the general fund is the assessment that Marissa sent out today. Did you get that one? Yeah, I think that makes the most sense. So this document that you'll see on your screen is essentially the assessment for the 2 towns for my department. And this really just includes or it only includes, general fund dollars. So as you can see, we haven't, for the most part, we've kind of maintained through the years pretty consistent. We really haven't added too much to the on the expenditure side. One increase obviously is the personnel, and that includes grade and step increases, and then COLAs, as well as contractual obligations for the admin, for the rec admin. And really the only other kind of slight increase from the past fiscal year is in custodial service. So we're looking to possibly change our custodial service this upcoming year. I just think we might get a better product or a better service. So you can see we're increasing that budget line by $1,000. And some other slight increases that you may see from actuals over the previous years really have to do with kind of the COVID situation, where myself and Danielle, who works in the office, did not travel to any conferences. So once we knew that we weren't going to be going to conferences, we took that out of the budget, but we're including those back into the fiscal year 22 projected. So it's pretty straightforward. We talk about that, for those that have kind of been before, we talk about our utilities, our heat and our electricity in the rec center, our custodial service, custodial supplies, office supplies, our telephones. So, those all are incorporated or captured in the general fund budget. And then as you can see at the bottom of this, Marissa always does a great job. You can see what the assessments are for each town based on the fiscal year 22 projections.
John?
Yeah.
One of the things that happens periodically is under that repair and maintenance of the building. I think sometimes you put in the floor refinishing.
Yep.
When is that due? I guess obviously it's not due next year, but.
So there's a difference between the refinishing and what we did in that particular year. So in this particular year, when we added it into the general fund, that was when we sanded it and we repainted it. So that was more of a heavier cost. So we split that 50-50 general fund, revolving fund. Normally, when we do just a gym floor refurbish, we pay for that out of the revolving fund. So the user fees or the program fees that we generate from programs that use the gym, we then in turn use that to finish the floor. So we do a floor refinish every 18 months. So we'll be on that schedule. We just did one this past fiscal year. So we'll be on that schedule probably late fiscal year 22.
Thank you.
No problem.
John, what was the COLA part of the personnel cost?
2%.
2%.
Yeah.
And the rest is a grade movement?
Correct. Grade movement. Yep.
Thank you.
I don't know if anyone has any other questions about the general fund budget.
Not on my end.
Forward. Jackie, it might be good just to go to maybe the one that's recreation revolving summary. We can quickly talk about that. Great, thank you. So like I do every year, provide everyone with, and again, you know, if you guys don't have the hard copies of this, be happy to provide it to anybody, with just an overview of our revolving fund from year to year. Obviously, you can see in fiscal year 20, we took quite a hit. And, you know, we do talk about this, you know, each time. And really that large hit was due to the fact that we did not have our camp program this past summer. So I know it is a little tricky and can be crazy. Because we generate, we spend our money before we can recapture it. So
Right.
essentially that summer we ran camp. So we expended all the expenditures for camp, and then we weren't able to recoup that by not having camp. So as you can see, the revolving fund, you know, we were down $130,000 in fiscal year 20. You know, hopefully we'll see that, you know, we'll see that kind of not happen again, to kind of gain back some of the money that we had lost. So, you know, the nice thing about it is we did have enough in the fund balance to take that hit and not have to hit, you know, any general fund money based on that deficit. But again, you know, it just goes through the you know, the different categories that we generate revenue in, and then the different categories that we expend. So I don't know if anyone has any questions on the rec revolving fund.
So, Sean, so this is assuming in 22 that your pool program, for example, will start at the beginning of the year, the swim year, if you will, or the.
Right. So this is, so in my fiscal year 22 budget, we are, you know, assuming things are somewhat back to normal, but at a reduced, you know, but at a much reduced total, because we're not going to be able to have the amount of people taking part of the class.
Right, right.
So as you can see, you know, just in for fiscal year 21, and really that has more to do with fiscal year 21 revised budget than it does for fiscal year 22 budget, because the fiscal year 22 budget, when we're talking about our camp program, we're talking about 18 months from now when we're generating revenue.
The
If that makes sense.
22, okay. That makes sense.
Right. So fiscal year 21 revised budget revenue for the Patton Park program would happen when we plan our park for this summer. And that's why that number is only at 80,000 compared to going fiscal year 22 when we up it to kind of back to our normal operating numbers.
So it makes sense on the revenue side on, if I'm looking at, is Patton Park program, is that the camp?
Yep.
Line item. So then why would those expenses in FY22, which would be this basically the summer, be more expensive than FY19 on a reduced basis? Does that make sense?
No, so fiscal year 21 would be, right, so fiscal year 22 expenses, right? So we're taking into account the raising cost of minimum wage, the raise, you know, our numbers, our staff will probably have to be, you know, our ratios will have to go up. You know, we'll have to have additional staff to help with, you know, anything that's kind of COVID related, more training, things of that. So the Patton Park program is not just staff; it's the entirety of the program. So we just anticipate, you know, having a bump in spending as we get into fiscal year 22.
Okay, so it's just more COVID related, that it's going to cost more for, even though there might be fewer people in the program this summer than in a normal year, it just might cost more to service.
Correct, and staffing plays a large part of that. And back in fiscal year 20, minimum wage was $12.50. Minimum wage is going to be $13.50 this summer. So it just takes into account a few different items.
That makes sense, Sean. Can you help me understand? So along the same lines, though, so on the revenue side, if at reduced levels for calendar year 21, the FY22 budget is back to pre-COVID levels, how does that play out again? Like rough numbers, 340 versus 330.
So I'm sorry, which were you looking at?
So on the revenue side.
Yeah.
So basically your expenses sort of precede your revenue recapture, right?
Correct.
Get the camps up and running, put all your money out, do your hiring, and then get paid for it. Right?
Correct.
And so when I look at like the FY22 budgeted revenues totaling 340,000, that sort of, is that for calendar year 21 operations, or should I be thinking calendar year 22?
Calendar year 22, I think.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why the revenue's back to normal, right?
Correct. Because
Okay. So
I'm just working under the assumption that summer 2022 will hopefully be, back to where we normally were.
Right. And I was thinking the same and just failing to make that connection. Okay. So that's where you have the revenue coming back and to the earlier points about the expenses, they're just naturally going to creep up anyway, just to keep those operations kind of back to normal.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, just overall, we see that there's in 20, there's a $130,000 loss, and in 21, year to date, there's a $22,000 loss. But does that mean that by the end of the year, there's going to be a surplus of 51?
That's what I have estimated. Now, again, remember, we didn't spend any money on the camp last summer. So when we recoup, when we call recoup, but when we generate revenue for the camp for this summer, it's not paying back any expenses that we had last summer because we didn't run the camp. So that's why you see in FY21 revised budget, we're only expending $20,000 on the camp because we're really just running the camp for 2 weeks and training and buying supplies and things of that nature. Does that make sense? I know it's confusing.
Well, I'm looking at that 130. Has that just come out of general fund? I guess I'm asking Marissa. Is that 130 under fiscal year 20?
No, so that doesn't come out of general fund. So like I mentioned at the beginning, we had enough in the fund total to be able to absorb the negative $130,000 hit.
Oh.
So the revolving fund actually had a decent balance in these last couple of years. It took a big hit of 130, and but there's actually still about $140,000 in the recreation revolving fund. So the $130,000 was not subsidized by the general fund. You'll probably remember that the pool revolving fund, we had a shortage of about $800, and that actually went to town meeting to be funded. I think it was funded from free cash, just to cover that deficit. In this particular case, we did have funds in the fund that actually we were able to, take the hit without having to go to the general fund or to town meeting to be able to cover that.
That's what I was I'm trying to see where we catch up. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like we've had that surplus in there already.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any other questions on rec revolving?
Marissa, do you keep a separate account spreadsheet document showing the revolving funds going in, revolving funds being spent, what the balance is, et cetera?
Absolutely. There is a separate fund. There's a recreation revolving fund. It's separate from any other fund. That's where all the revenues and all the expenditures related to any activities, camp, youth programs, any of the activities from the recreation department. That's where all the revenue goes. That's where all the expenditures are. So that fund currently has about $140,000 in there.
Could that be made available?
Absolutely.
Thank you. It'd just be helpful to round out the whole picture of the expense, the revenues, and how that revolving fund kind of operates.
Can definitely send that out.
Thank you.
And there were two funds, right, Marissa, that are now going to be merged?
So that's.
So I think that's the
idea.
next topic that
Or
Sean's
maybe,
gonna
yeah,
want to
but
talk to you
I
about.
might be
but-
getting ahead of
That
him.
would be, I can either get into that, or if anyone would like to see a quick snapshot of the pool revolving fund, I can have Jackie throw that on the screen as well. Kind of
Yes, I
same
would.
idea with, we didn't run the pool. As Marissa said, we did have a deficit. But over the course of the years when we have run the pool, we have been able to show that, the pool has been able to, kind of pay for itself, as its own separate revolving fund. But, and again, all this, information is on the town's financial software. I just do this for kind of my own, my own look at it, and then, to give it to, to provide the information to all of you. Especially the revenue part. I think it helps, letting the FinComs know exactly where or which kind of bucket that revenue is coming from.
Can we see down to the bottom?
So as you can see, ending fiscal year 20, we had a negative balance of 820.75, which was reduced to zero at STM. We did have to open the pool, take the cover off, run the pool last fiscal year. So that's why you see the negative 7,000. That's what it costs to kind of keep the pool going, even though we weren't operating.
Okay, good.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
And again, that negative balance is made up by the balance in the revolving fund.
Not this particular one. We actually do have a deficit in this fund, but because a lot of the memberships, we won't know until end of the fiscal year, really, because that's when the memberships are sold. So you probably should start seeing revenue coming in April. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but I think that's when you start selling the memberships for the pool.
Correct. And, we still, I think there's still a lot of questions on, what the guidelines from the state will be about running, an outdoor swimming pool, capacity limits, things of that nature. So those are all things that we need to take into account when we look at, operating the pool. So, based upon the state guidelines that were for last summer, we had to operate the pool at 40%. Camps were not allowed to use, what they called communal pools. So when we closed the pool, obviously it was there was a health sorry, my child. There was a health aspect, but certainly a financial aspect with it too.
As a parent with kids, I would think you can charge whatever you want this summer.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Yeah.
You might need to. And then really, one of the things that, I've been kind of looking at for a while here now is combining these two funds into one just general, recreation and pool revolving fund. So I know, Jackie, I do have a kind of a bullet point list. So yeah, hopefully Jackie can get that on. But so just going back to when we built the original pool, or excuse me, the new pool. So at the time, the Massachusetts had not passed the Municipal Modernization Act. So revolving funds, no matter what department, the revolving fund was in, could only expend 1% of the town's total tax levy. So essentially, at the time, it was about $253,000. That was 1% of Hamilton's tax levy. So no matter how much revenue we brought in, we could only expend $253, or it would go to the general fund. So that was really the reasoning why we went to the two revolving funds, is because we knew that if we combined our pool and our camp expenses, our whole general program expenses, we would exceed the 253. So we then moved to two revolving funds. And like I said there, it forced the creation of additional revolving fund. So one thing that the Modernization Act allows you to do is you can set the expenditure limit really at any number you would like. So, you know, when we set our expenditure limits, we base it on our projections. And, you know, we've been fortunate that we've been so, you know, especially in fiscal year 20, that we had so much success. Our programs were so busy. We actually increased the spending limit halfway through the year because we knew that due to the, you know, how many programs we were running, we were just going to be expending more money. It also, you know, by combining into the one revolving fund, it lets us go back to how we originally were set up. So I know Marissa had made this point, and it's really a good one. When we talk about the balance that was in that recreation revolving fund that allowed us to carry that negative $130,000 last year, some of that money goes back, you know, 20 years to when we had the old pool. So there is still some revenue or some of that balance in that rec revolving fund that dates back to the old pool. Another thing that we end up doing kind of on our end is because the camp is really, or the pool is a really big attraction for the kids that go to camp, and our camp uses the pool, that we then now have to, we invoice ourselves. So we send an invoice, and we do it I do with help with the finance department. We send an invoice from the pool revolving fund to the recreation revolving fund. And really it's, you know, it can be cumbersome and it's difficult because all of our revenue goes into one bucket. So we need to move it around a little bit based upon what program. So this just allows us to basically have that one fund for our department and not have to go back and bill ourselves. And then really just, you know, it's not going to change anything when we talk about how, you know, we're going to present our budgets to the boards, to the public. You know, we will separate it out so you will know, you know, kind of, you know, what the pool is and the revenue and the expenditures on the pool, and the revenue and the expenditures on the regular recreation revolving fund. So, you know, we're not trying to hide anything or, you know, not trying to not be transparent. We certainly will do that. But, you know, I do think that, you know, since in recreation departments, we're really a driving force behind the revolving fund, maximum being more than 1% of the tax levy for exactly these reasons is, you know, it really hampered our ability to be successful, because the more successful you are, the more money you're going to spend, because the more money you're taking in. So this, you know, I hope that, you know, when moving forward, we'll be able to combine the revolving funds. And, you know, I think it gives us a little more financial flexibility as well, because we'll be in a pretty tough spot with the pool if our capacity limits are minimized again for this summer.
Marissa, do you have a comment about that?
I do, as usual, right, David? I think the way we're doing things right now, it's inefficient, to be honest with you. Having the two revolving funds, it's just generating more work and more room for error. If we were to, so in my opinion, when the new pool was built and when this new fund, the pool revolving fund was created, this should have been an allocation of the revenues that were in the recreation fund that were related to the old pool, and that allocation should have been moved to this new fund. That never happened. So we know that there's funds in the recreation revolving fund that actually belong to the pool. There's no way of knowing how much of it is. And like Sean said, if the guidelines, you know, are strict, we might end up again with a deficit at the end of the fiscal year, depending on what the capacity is. If this was part of the recreation revolving fund, we could probably absorb that. And if it's not, we're probably going to have to go again to town meeting and in order to fund the deficit in the fund. The other two reasons that Sean mentioned is we take in credit card receipts. In order to take in credit card receipts, you have parents that they're going to sign up their kids for a pool membership. They're going to sign up for any other program. They're not going to do separate, you know, payments. They do one payment for all the programs. Well, because we only have one account for the credit card receipts, everything goes into one account, and then everything needs to be manually transferred from the recreation to the pool. To me, that's inefficient, and it just adds more room for error. There is no limitations now since the Municipal Modernization Act. There is no limitations. You still need to vote a spending limit. You can actually increase that spending limit during the year if you think you're actually going to reach that limit, which, as Sean mentioned, we just did that last year. And I think we're now at 350. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was our spending limit. And like Sean said, that's still a way to track what's similar to how he did it for the revolving recreation revolving, showing what's the adult programs, what's the youth programs. There could still be a line item for what the pool receipts are, what the pool expenditures are.
So how is the combination achieved? Is it a matter of Sean's discretion, or is there some governmental process?
Well, what we'd probably need to do, would probably need to have a vote so that, you know, whatever funds surplus or deficit, you know, depending on what it is, but if there's a surplus in the fund, that you could actually close this fund and vote to transfer the funds into the recreation revolving fund. And then you could increase the spending limit on the recreation revolving fund, and then it would just you know, be amended that recreation revolving fund would also include pool activities.
Town meeting
When you
votes?
say votes on it, who votes on it?
Town meeting.
Right.
Thank you.
So I just want to, if I can just add, when I was talking to Sean and Marissa, it was struck me that the important point is that this was separated into two funds because of the way the law was written previously, and the law has now changed so we can do one fund. And the effect of having the two funds is an incredible amount of detailed work of splitting up those every single payment that comes in, recalculating it and splitting it into the two funds. So it does seem like a good idea to me to merge them back into one fund.
Yeah, I mean, everyone looks at this as a shared program that includes both. So having two separate funds only means that, like we just had happen, it was only $800, but we had to actually appropriate that, or at least use free cash at town meeting because of that deficit, which could easily have been covered by the other fund.
I have a quick question. It sounds like it makes sense to combine them. I just wanted to do diligence and see, is there any downside to combining them?
Not in my opinion, that's for sure. But you know, I think just from you know, because I think that the camp and the pool are so closely aligned, and the pool is probably, you know 70% of the people who attend camp probably attend camp because we have a swimming pool. It just makes it, you know, incredibly difficult because then we have lifeguards that are lifeguarding when the camp is in the pool, and then our camp is, you know, using the pool, and the camp is using the pool supplies. So then so everything is just so tightly aligned and so closely aligned that, you know, for me, it makes perfect sense to just have the one fund.
Okay, thank you.
I think they, you know, anticipated one concern might be that we wouldn't have the clarity or the separation, but I think that's taken care of by the financial reporting, that would still remain separated.
That was actually the
Good
comment
point,
that I was
Christina.
going to make, because it wouldn't be in a separate fund. People might be worried about, you know, being transparent. But Sean actually has the rec program in which he actually enters all of his receipts by program type. So he would still be able to provide that information. You wouldn't be able to see it by just, you know, running a report in the accounting software. But when Sean prepares these reports on the revolving funds, he runs everything from the rec program, and he can actually have another revenue line item for pool receipts, similar to how he has them for the youth programs, adult programs. So I think that that would be one concern, is like, maybe losing the transparency because of not having the two funds, but I think that can still be accomplished.
Melissa,
I forget, can you remind me, how does, or does Pleasant Pond play into any of this?
Not part of this joint program.
Okay.
Pleasant Pond is actually Wenham is the lead community on the Pleasant Pond. It's not part of the recreation. And we actually get invoiced or assessed by Wenham on the Pleasant Pond separately.
Okay.
If there's interest in folding that into this, kind of while you're at it, you could do that too.
Good, Alex.
thank you. No, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Marissa, generally, how many revolving funds in total, not just recreation, that Hamilton has?
Hamilton has 4.
What? Assuming one might be health, might be.
Yes, we do have health clinics.
Right.
And
COA may have one.
COA, correct.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, water is also an enterprise fund, but.
Oh.
No.
That's not.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you ask? You were asking about revolving.
Only revolving funds. Sorry, my mistake. Revolving funds, yes.
Okay.
Just quickly getting back to Pleasant Pond, I don't know I can't remember who raised that, but my understanding is, and maybe this is another discussion, that Hamilton may not be interested in continuing their involvement or support of the Pleasant Pond program. We should try to clarify that going into 22. Gary, am I correct on that?
I think that's the idea expressed before for concerning Pleasant Pond. So if we can get some sort of confirmation, and we'll start looking at options for the Wenham side, what to do.
Okay. Great.
So we would ask our respective boards of select people to include on the ATM warrant the appropriate article to accomplish this?
I think it's just the Hamilton side, because
Oh, okay.
it just gets assessed. So nothing really changes from Wenham's point of view. They would get the exact same bill whether we had one fund or two.
All right. So
it's already on our working list of articles.
do you want to vote of FinCom, John or Joe, or is that not necessary?
I think we'll just address it when because it was already, I think, to be on that, like Joe said, on the warrant list. So we'll do our formal recommendation with the rest of the warrant.
Okay.
Okay, John, you want to move along to inspectional services? I know Jackie is here, but it's going to be moving over to Hamilton.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean.
Sean, appreciate it.
Good job.
Yeah,
Sean.
let's
Very nice.
let's move to inspectional. And I think, yeah, that's the sort of key item is, and I didn't know if it was definitive at this point in time. I know it was trending and almost certainly in that direction, but so yeah, so any sort of update on the process there or how that changes the numbers.
So I will just quickly start. Jackie Bresnahan, Director of Administrative Services for Wenham. So I did provide to Joe and Patrick and their team, Patrick Greffett in the planning office in Hamilton, all of the information that I had prepared for fiscal 22 so that they had something to work off of. And I'm also working to transfer all of the job descriptions, interview questions that we've used, and all the HR management of inspectional services to Hamilton so that they have that for their records. So while we have not had a formal final vote of the select boards from each community on a final draft of the IMA, they did give us tentative approval on the change to Hamilton. So obviously in Wenham, that's one of the things that we can't address just yet. We're working obviously on solutions with Selectman Cheeseman on what to do moving forward. But I've done all of the due diligence of handing everything over on my end to Patrick. And I believe he may have an update on Hamilton's budget process for the department for you.
Thank you, Jackie. I know many of you, several of you I don't. I'm Patrick Reffett, Director of Planning and Inspections for Hamilton. I've been here for 6 years. Happy to engage you folks. This program is basically 3 years old. It's been overseen by Jackie and Wenham largely due to the IMA during the period heretofore. She's done a great job. We greatly thank her for that. Yeah, can't thank her enough, in fact. So, but that's one of the things that we anticipate changing is for the town of Hamilton to be overseeing it for the next period. I would be the director person to do that. There are a number of things that will be different that I'd like to update you on as you look at the budget, and I apologize that we don't have that completed for you yet. There are a number of things that factor in that, as Jackie has mentioned to you. One of the important things is that and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jackie, is that given the permitting levels over the last review year, the cost proportions will be changing a little bit. Wenham will now have 39.1% of the cost share proportion. The town of Hamilton will have 60.9. So Hamilton's gone down a little bit. Wenham's gone up some. In the budget that we hope to get you shortly, there will be COLAs at 2% for staffing. We are still reviewing some staffing needs, some desires for changes, etc. One of the most notable is that we do want to make the request, and this request will be about a $20,000 addition to the building commissioner position. Right now, we have a building inspector. We hope to upgrade that position to building commissioner. We've got a number of complex projects that are coming to the town of Hamilton. I know Wenham has some ongoing right now. We need some additional skill level to be able to address those kinds of projects. To give you an understanding of the magnitude that I'm talking about, at Gordon Conwell Theologic Seminary, that property is going to see a major redo for all the residential units. They were constructed in an era of lesser requirements for accessibility, ADA, plumbing, fire codes, other kinds of things that need to be upgraded as part of this reconstruction project. There's several others that will be before the town too. I also want to make as part of this position an element that we'd like to do a much better job at within the zoning and enforcement element of that. You know, both communities have a need for it. That's something that we anticipate having a much stronger presence as part of with a building commissioner. An element of that is a need to be able to have the commissioner work with the boards as part of crafting zoning and planning decisions. There are a lot of legalities that go into that we need better help than what we've had the ability to afford so far. So that's going to be the largest element of request
within the budget that we do submit to you hopefully very shortly. Questions?
Patrick, can I add one clarification quickly?
Please do.
I just want to identify for the Wenham FinCom and maybe the Hamilton FinCom too, that the building position would remain the only full-time position at this point, meaning the only position that's benefited with insurance and everything. So from what Patrick's describing to you, he and Joe have kept me informed as to the changes that they're looking to make. And I just want to clarify for Wenham, especially that, you know, we currently only have one benefited employee. That employee would now become a Hamilton employee, but only that position will remain benefited. Everything else will be part-time in the way it is currently.
Patrick?
And before we get into the questions, if I could just offer to just an update. We are also, as Jackie pointed out, both boards of selectmen voted to authorize us to rework the IMA with the change in leadership and rework. We had indicated at that time that we wanted to make some adjustment to the full-time position. So we are completing a rewrite of the intermunicipal agreement, new dates with Hamilton in the lead, with a caveat that in 3 years we'll study it and see about sending it the lead responsibilities back to Wenham. And we are updating the building, the job description for the lead position. So we're almost finished with those. And my expectation is that by the second meeting in February, both boards of selectmen will have the opportunity to review those as part of our proposal for the upcoming budget. So it should have it within the next week or so.
Patrick?
Yes, sir.
Jim Purdy, if I understood it correctly, the projects are more complex, more involved, there's more of them, and that's driving the need from building inspector to building commissioner?
Yes, sir.
And, okay, so what is the difference? I just plead ignorance on this, I don't know. What's the difference between a building inspector and a building commissioner in terms of training background? And the second question I have, Patrick, because of the complexities of these programs, would there be increases to the electrical and the plumbing and gas inspector because of the complexities of some of these programs? So the first question is the difference between a building inspector and a commissioner, and the second is the need for plumbing and electrical. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It is interesting how this works because a building commissioner is not only a commissioner, he's also an inspector. A building inspector is not a commissioner. It has to do with the level of classes and attainment and testing at the state reviewers as part of the building commissioner testing process. It's very thorough. They take a lot of coursework. They take a fair amount of instruction in an ongoing way. They have to pass those certifications in order to get that as a commissioner. You also have to get them as an inspector, but not at the level that a commissioner is. So I hope I didn't muddy that up too much. Let's see, the other item was regarding the other inspectors. They would remain the same. Plumbing's plumbing, electrical, largely the same thing. I think you'll find a little bit more complexity regarding fire safety kinds of things that are part of the electrical evaluation of buildings. So, you know, I don't see us needing to have additional gray matter hired beyond where we already are at now.
Patrick, can I add on one item to that?
Sure.
Well, So when we initially, Patrick and I were both on the team that originally looked at shared inspectional services, and we talked to other communities. We talked between us, Hamilton and Wenham, and the model that we're currently existing in is what we determined with MAPC, who helped us time to determine the right fit at the time. But even in those preliminary discussions, the intention was any additional capacity needed for electrical and plumbing would mean additional part-time hires rather than expanding the current positions to a more comprehensive role, due to the fact that the towns were looking at this not just from a cost saving perspective, but from a quality of service perspective. But we recognize that the two FinComs and the two select boards would not look at this as just quality of service. They also wanted to see some cost savings. So by creating a model where those roles create part-time capacity when we need to add on or to reduce, instead of having a full-time employee in those roles that's benefited in a permanent position, if we needed to add more in the future, we could add more, and we would do so with additional part-time folks instead of increasing the singular positions, because we wanted to not completely skyrocket inspectional services budgeting. So that's something that to just keep in mind as we move forward, of why the way we started in the beginning was intentional to create a quality of service improvement, but also recognizing that we needed to be mindful of how much each town was putting out individually before this started, and the new costs that were associated in a joint program of getting it up and running, and trying to see some cost savings over time as we improved the service.
Thank you, Jackie. In a relative way, my prior capacity was director of planning and inspections in the town of Natick. That's a 35,000 population community with the malls and Route 9, sizable downtown. Our electrical inspector services, as well as the gas and plumbing services, were both part-time for that community. So I'm not really anticipating, major expansions in a commercial way in either of our communities. Hopefully we'll have a little bit over time, but I'm not anticipating a magnitude greater than what we have, unless there are major projects that come along that for a finite review period require more assistance and services than what our part-time people have, but it would only be needed in a part-time way. Anything else?
Jackie, Patrick, just a quick question. The fees generated from the permit, the revenue from that, does that go into the general fund?
Yes, sir.
And
So
it
it
goes
does-
into each community's general fund. This arrangement has nothing to do with the revenues. The shared arrangement. We keep our revenue, we still have in-house staff in both town halls. We keep our revenue, Hamilton keeps
For-
their revenue.
For our projects and Wenham. So
Correct.
it's not a 39-60 split. It's based
Not
on
at
the
all.
actual projects that we're permitting and getting fee revenue for those. Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Are the permitting fees the same in Hamilton and Wenham?
That's a good question.
Not at this time. We typically, since I've been here, 5.5 years ago, we've reviewed the fees every 1.5 to 2 years. So we've probably done 2 major increases on the Wenham end in the last 5 years. It's something we're consistently looking at on a regular basis. Our fees are a little bit lower in some areas and higher in others. Patrick, I don't know when the last time Hamilton reviewed offhand.
I believe that was about 3 years ago, and we had a fairly sizable increase when that occurred.
But if it looks to me like the split also takes into account the actual permit dollars, is that correct?
It takes in account the volume of physical, like the number of permits, not the dollar value of the revenue. So like so there's two numbers there, Susan, that you're talking about. There's the
Yeah.
physical number of permits, and then there's the value of those permits. So the revenue on our side, we see the reflection of the value of the permits, but the number of physical pieces of permit processed are what factor into the funding formula with the population.
Okay, so it's based on let's say the building cost and not the permit fees, is that correct?
Opposite. So the program, the assessment is based on population and the number of physical building permits, electrical permits, plumbing and gas permits. It's on
Okay.
how we process, not the value of what we process.
Is there a reason that both towns can't charge the same? I mean, it would just kind of simplify everything, including for a contractor who does work in both.
So it's this area Mass General Law where each community gets to set their fees. So we've never combined revenue for this because each office still has its own administrative person who's doing that. So, you know, that might be something we can look into for the future.
No, I'm not suggesting combining them. I'm suggesting making the fees the same. In other words, a construction permit for $1 million house is the same as a permit for in Hamilton and Wenham. It would just make sense. And may also enable us to have some rationale for boosting things up a little on both sides.
Pick the highest of both.
Exactly.
Yeah. We're both, I think, pretty high in terms of the North Shore from the last time. We ended up doing, you know, 2 smaller increases, not smaller, but 2 more modest increases over time, whereas I think Hamilton did a major jump about 3 years ago. It's just something that, you know, it's the business of each select board. So it's something we can certainly discuss, you know, the next time we do all of the fees in Wenham we do a review of all of the fees. It's not just my permitting office, it's also the land use fees, the fire department fees. So because it's approved by each board of selectmen, it's something we do as the town's fee and revenue overview versus something we talk about with Hamilton. We can certainly look to it in the future. It's an item more of the board of selectmen in each community than it is of this revenue process of who pays each other for the staffing. So I think it's definitely a conversation. It's just not ever, we've done it a different way, so.
Okay, thank you.
Generally, Jim, it's a very good practice, which I've worked on with the communities in the past, of generally every 3 years do a triennial review of all permit fees throughout the town, building, health fees, recreation fees and such. But Jackie is right. It's generally up to the elected body, the select board, to make that. And there's been cases where select boards have not wanted to raise fees for a number of reasons, but it's generally a good practice to review at least every 3 years.
Yeah, I think so.
My FinCom's going to want us to review our fees this year.
You can borrow our fee review binder, our fee review schedule, Joe, if you would like it, because we've been doing it every 2 years since I've been here.
Yep.
We talk about fees a lot.
I agree with Tom that a regular, that reviewing fees at a regular interval makes sense. I also agree with Jackie that generally boards of selectmen choose to do this as part of a review of all fees, not just building fees.
Right.
And part of that conversation has more to do with what the local appetite for handling fees is too. So it's a little bit difficult to try to equalize them across community boundaries. One of the trouble spots for raising fees too much or too often is that oftentimes people will decide, well, I'm still going to do the work, I'm just not going to pull the permit for it. And so you wind up seeing the inverse of what you want, which when you raise fees, you're expecting an increase in your revenues from that side. But if you raise it too much or too often, people stop pulling permits, and then you see a decrease in the fees, and you have the potential for shoddy work being done out there that you don't have any record of. So, and then that also catches up to you in your your evaluations, because you're not capturing the improvements to homes all along as they're being done. They're being hidden because the residents didn't want to pay the permit fees, so they're being hidden. So we don't know that they added a bathroom or that they upgraded a bathroom. So we don't get to capture that in the reval. So I think it's really, we really have to be careful about setting fees based on individual communities and your own kind of cadence to it.
In my experience, the art and science about set-in fees is that you don't want to be too far out from your neighbors, nor do you want to be too far behind.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why, it's always going to be up to our respective towns, Board of Selectmen to set the rates, but comparing notes, I think certainly makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they
Especially
should-
something in like permitting where you may look at, hey, we increased the rate here 3 years ago, and we actually did not see a decrease in, permits of that type being pulled. I mean, anywhere we can share information, so.
And part of the assessing fees is always looking to see what like communities around you are doing with that same kind of fee. You always want to you want to be fair, right? You don't want people to say, hey, how come it's $20 per thousand in Hamilton and it's only $15 per thousand in Wenham or Ipswich or Beverly. People get antsy. They want to know, they want to feel like they're being treated fairly. So we have to kind of make that assessment.
Yeah, but both towns seem to have an appetite for very high taxes, and I can't imagine that it wouldn't be prudent to have some offset to that. But anyway.
I think that the fees aren't going to be make or break, right?
Right.
It was like, sorry if it's Patrick's or Joe's point, like too far in front or too far behind. Like your determination as to where to build that house in one of our two great towns isn't going to be based on the fees. However, Susan, the taxes are consideration.
Right.
I think that the motivations for Hamilton wanting to pursue the commissioner versus inspector role makes sense for Hamilton. And at first I was thinking like, well, how would we benefit in the same way? Because even if you have a shared provider or this role is working across both towns, the zoning laws, which you seek, I think, to kind of get tie in with the inspectional services office, which I think makes sense in light of like large projects and the like, are specific to Hamilton, whereas Wenham's are unique to Wenham. But we would benefit, I would think, as well from the standpoint of large projects in Wenham, having the added oomph of a commissioner, whether it's like, whatever, a big 40B project or whatever it is. So I think it makes sense.
Alex, you also bring up a really good point too, that we, in our land use office, we have, Hamilton has Patrick full-time, but then they also have a separate conservation coordinator. I'm not sure, Joe, if your conservation person is part-time or full-time at this point.
Part-time, but he works part-time here and part-time in West Newbury as well, so.
Yeah, and we only have 2 part-time people in our land use office. So having additional capacity in a building commissioner role can be really helpful in guiding the zoning and planning boards. And also when it's time to do bylaw review and updates, I think that's a capacity that we would, get a benefit from. And though we don't have projects coming in the pipeline just yet, we just finished and got started on 2 major projects. In the next 2 to 3 years, we will see groundbreaking on the 40B over on Maple Woods. So that's something that we want to be prepared to have capacity in and someone who's dealt with those projects. So, I don't see a downside in seeing more expertise and education in that particular position. And I think Hamilton's ready to move on that. It's something, we've thought about for years, but they're looking to make that change and they have some capacity to have those discussions.
John, I just saw your note.
Yeah, that was for Valerie. Yeah, just for the.
Okay.
Valerie had to leave it. She had a hard stop.
Okay. I misunderstood it. I'm sorry. Yep. Okay. Can we move on here? It is 8 o'clock. We were going to try to wrap up around 8, but John, you want to discuss? You wanted to put on for discussion the school budget and the impact on towns. You want to start with that?
Yeah, and I think it was really to sort of and we're obviously in the middle of the process here, and we the school had their first presentation of their budget a couple of weeks ago. We actually had Mary Beth and Vinny attend our last FinCon meeting to sort of walk us through it. You know, it was very helpful to, you know, we had seen the presentation that they made to the school committee, but it was also great to have, you know, them available to answer questions. They were, you know, very, very forthcoming. And, you know, I don't know if a similar thing has happened on the Wenham side, or if it makes sense just to, you know, talk about sort of where we go from here. One of the things in particular was, you know, their budget, you know, first draft of the budget came in, at least on the operational side, with a 5% increase. A lot of that was attributable to some of the cutbacks they had done at the end of last year, what they are sort of terming their recovery of adding back staff, albeit a lot of staff at a lower lower experience level and a lower cost level. But, you know, it really sort of led us to the discussion of, you know, in general, I think a lot of thought was put into it, but, you know, certainly from our perspective in Hamilton, and I know Wenham's going to share the same view, we're right up against Prop 2.5. And it's very real likelihood for our town this year. And we haven't, you know, rolled up the entire budget yet, but in terms of the school playing such a big portion of that, even at 5%, which I think from the assessment point of view, it actually hits Hamilton more like 5.5%, is you know, is going to be problematic for us. And that then prompted it, without even getting into specifics, it was just sort of our initial feedback to Mary Beth and Vinny. They'd asked the question, well, where, you know, where should it be if there was a target? And I think it was, I'm not sure that they were necessarily offering to lower it to that level. We had sort of thrown out just as a sort of, you know, placeholder at a sort of, you know, anytime you're at the sort of 3% level, given that we're right up against Prop 2.5 in both towns, it's always going to come into play anytime you're at 3% or above. So, and you know, in a sense, we were talking about, you know, beyond just this year as well, because unfortunately, it looks like it's Prop 2.5 is certainly on the Hamilton side, it's going to be a recurring theme for the next few years. So yeah, it was really the reason why I wanted to make it a topic tonight was just sort of to get initial reactions. I know there's a lot more additional meetings and more drafts of the school budget to come, but if there were wanted to find out from, you know, Wenham's point of view, if there were any thoughts about the initial budget proposal or thoughts about the process going forward, really.
Just briefly, and everyone else can jump in on the Wenham side. We're meeting, we're having the same meeting I think that you've had Monday afternoon, this coming Monday afternoon, John, prior to the February 10th combined meeting. So we haven't had a second follow-up meeting with the superintendent or with Vinny Leone. So where are we at now? Right now, we're still at the same point of my understanding is a 2.8% increase. Ours went down modestly because of the shift of population. It amounts for us about, I just was looking at this last chart, about $321,000 of an increase in the operating budget for the Wenham share. And again, we have, like Hamilton, we have not settled out our total budget. You know, we're at the point that we had this budget, the school budget in front of us, we were showing approximately a 600 and correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie or Jackie or Tom, about a $625,000 structural problem with our budget, and that hasn't changed to date. So we're looking forward to the meeting with them this coming Monday in the afternoon. See where we're at.
Jim, can I just clarify that that's not a public meeting? That's you and Mary Beth and Vinny. It's not a posted FinCom meeting that folks are expected.
Okay, right. Carrie
Unless,
and I,
unless it is,
excuse
right?
me?
It's not a posted FinCom meeting. It's just
Oh,
you.
right,
and-
I understand that, right. But
Okay,
Carrie and
just so
I,
folks are clear.
yeah, Carrie and I will be attending. Carrie's the liaison to the
Yeah,
school.
so I believe Tom Younger will be there as well, and so will myself and the Board of Selectmen and FinCom chairs from Hamilton.
For this,
Our meetings, that meeting on Monday or Tuesday? On Monday, right?
this is a meeting, Joe, this is a meeting on Monday at 3:30.
That's a different meeting.
I think it's a different meeting, but
I have a meeting on Monday at 3:30, Monday the 1st at 3:30, with the chairs of the 5 committees and the superintendent administrator.
Oh,
Believe it.
That's correct, I believe. I think it's
It's
the,
Gary. It should be on your side. It should be Gary, Jim, and Tom with
Yes.
me, Sean Farrell, John, and Christina.
Yep.
Yep, 3:30 is correct.
yep.
And Marissa will be there for us, and Vinny will be there for the schools. So
Okay,
it's
thank
just
you for clarifying that. I thought it was a Wenham meeting. I didn't have the full information.
Jackie looks confused.
I just didn't hear Jamie's name on there, so if you're adding, assistant superintendents of finance and finance directors, I don't know if Jamie's on that list, so if you could include her, because I think that would be important if finance folks are gonna be there. Just didn't hear her name come up. I know,
I'm looking at the list now. She's not.
yeah, I don't know why she keeps getting let off that leadership list, but if we can include her, I know she can't be on camera right now, but if she could be included, I would be grateful.
Yep, should be.
Jackie?
Jamie, are you there? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Who's going to be in touch with the schools to put Jamie's name on the list?
I can
Tom,
send
can you do that?
an email right now, Jim.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jackie.
So from our meeting, the rubber and the budget seems to be at least twofold. One, the bargaining with the teachers, and two, the speed with which positions that had been abandoned are put back. That is, if you will, the student-teacher ratio and the subjective nature of that. I think, John, they had indicated that 3% was sort of a non-starter for them.
I think they had said it would be very, very, very difficult, but it certainly seemed that there was some give. And to be fair, David, some of the add back in staff was also restructuring to operate more efficiently. So it wasn't all just basically taking positions that were eliminated and adding them back in.
No, but nevertheless, it's all a subjective slate, whether it's a measure of efficiency, of measuring the ratio of.
Which is definitely true. I didn't want to give anyone the impression that it was simply bringing back necessarily the exact same people or the same positions. But it also begs the question, is there a middle ground? Is there potential some add backs, but not at the level that they were doing it right out of the gate?
Yes.
The one thing that everyone needs to realize, and it came out today in the governor's budget proposal for our regional district, we only netted a $43,000 increase over last year. That's basically for our Chapter 78 minus our charges. It's only a $43,000 net increase.
It's better than a loss.
It's better than a loss, but still.
And I think they're carrying in their budget a loss right now. I think they were projecting a decrease. So an increase. It's only $43,000 over what they got this year, but it's more than that over what they're carrying in their budget right now. So.
Right.
Aren't they talking about using the rainy day fund? I saw for the budget overall the state. There's a $1.6 billion saving.
They did take money from the rainy day fund. what had happened with the school funding this year is a lot of the school funding went to districts that were having various issues as far as, educational programs and such. So it's probably part of one of the reasons why we did not, move as highly as other communities did.
David, to answer your question, they did talk about the rainy day fund. They waiting for the new administration's packages to come out to see if they'll have to dip into it as much as they originally thought.
I think they would if it's raining, right?
Certainly is.
Yeah, it's really raining.
I wonder about the enrollment longer, like medium term and long term. I think, was it about 100 students that had left the district? Is that about right?
There's more than that, I think.
I think it's 160.
Yeah.
60. Okay.
Either they went remote. Oh, I'm sorry, Alex. I'll let you.
No problem. No problem. Go ahead, David.
That 160 was not everyone who left, but a certain amount of them just were still in school, but being fully remote.
No, they were homeschooled.
A lot of them were homeschooled, yeah.
Either transferred to another district or were homeschooled. Because I don't think they would count. I don't think they're accounting for students that have gone, if they're still enrolled in the district, if they opted to be fully remote, right? That'd still be.
I thought I asked that on the joint call with Michelle Bailey prior to the holidays about that number, but whatever, I took us off topic.
A lot of them have gone to private schools and.
Agreed.
Yeah, I just was just going to make the point that the superintendent had indicated that she felt some majority or some significant percentage of those students who had left would be back. And I don't know on what, if that is an accurate prediction or not. Well, we won't know. But I think that there's there's a tremendous level of dissatisfaction, not across the board, but among many families of parents of students in the district with the school's response to COVID. And we all heard that loud and clear, right? With regard to the public health. I mean, that's no surprise. We all know that. And I think that underlies the decision of some of those students to have been, unenrolled, so to speak. And I don't know that trend, if it is one, or that has abated fully, and certainly that it's about to reverse course, and that those students would all of a sudden re-enroll in short order to the district. So to the point that was made about hiring back positions that had been vacated, if it's on the basis, if it's predicated upon the assumption that those students are going to come right back after whatever, this fall or whenever it is, I'm not sure about that. I think there could be a trend that actually is just starting to take shape, especially as siblings of those who maybe are now going to private school join those who have. Right. I wouldn't plan on all of them coming back in a year.
No, I think it's a hard thing if you put a child in private school to bring them back. I mean, having had both, I think that would be difficult.
I would agree. No, I would agree. And that's why we should ask next week just to confirm because that's why I was thinking they were expecting some of them back, because some of them are still fully remote, still part of the school district, but just doing fully remote through Zoom or now.
I would say that's what I would say that I did with my children. And from my point of view, it was purely the question, are they going to go to school? And I was on the verge of, homeschooling them, but only because of the options of either they're going to go to school or they're going to stay home. And if they can go to school full time, I would easily send them right back. So I think we are going to see a resurgence of, I'm sure not all, but I think we can say a good number of them, but it's definitely something to ask. And I think we did at that last meeting talk a little bit about that, what her assumptions were for how many students would come back. And it seemed, I don't remember what the response was, unfortunately, but it seemed reasonable to me that they're not, it's not just based on 100% of those students coming back. I think they also they have in mind how many kindergartners are coming in this coming year. And so the calculations of how many, I think that was a bigger consideration than, maybe high schoolers who sophomore who was taken out and may or may not come back for the next 2 years.
Do you remember what the breakdown was between homeschooling and private schools or out of district?
I don't remember.
Feel like it was 2/3 or 75% were homeschool, but I could be totally wrong about that. It was higher than I thought because, I share other people's views that I feel like, I think homeschooled, good chance they're going to come back, but I feel like private school is going to be pretty sticky and a lot of those are not going to be coming back. And like some people said, like it could even mean more if they've got siblings, other people leaving the district as well. So I think further drill down on that will be important.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, last year, they didn't plan on as much state aid as they got. And so we all passed an override that basically compensated for that. So that money is now sitting where and when will they have access to it and perhaps reduce what we have to pay?
My understanding is that it's sort of like a year delay. So it would hit E&D, but it will not hit it for FY22. It would be for an FY23.
Right.
It's similar to like free cash, right? You have to wait till the books close and are certified by the state before it can then actually be stored in E&D, and you only get access to it after that happens. So we can't plan on that money for FY22 because they have to close out the year and identify what the overage is and have it certified before it becomes E&D.
Yeah, unfortunately, all the taxpayers just got this huge tax bill that it did include that. So I don't know.
Among the other elephants in the schoolroom are the OPEB liability, which is remarkably high. And they've just included in the budget really a de minimis commencement of funding. So the current OPEB liability is paid out of the current annual budget. And that's close, I think, to $1 million, they said. And then the other elephant is they're going to be looking for a new school. Right. And they believe that they'll gain approval from the state agency. And they're looking at a time schedule of 3 to 5 years. And if the state agency assumes a portion, it's around 40%, give or take.
Right.
So the towns will be assuming financing close to 60% in accordance with our respective assessment ratios. So that if they're looking for a new school, to me, that argues for their having, or they should be having greater flexibility in terms of the year-to-year budget increases, anticipating the sale to the public of funding a new school.
Did the school system, Tom or Joe or anyone, get any additional COVID relief funding separate from town relief dollars?
Over the past year?
Yeah.
I would rely on Jackie because I wasn't here or
I think that they got money from, Desi had separate money for them. I'm not sure how it works for a regional, but for my previous municipality, they used the same CARES Act money that the town had, but they did get a certain amount from Desi.
The regionals were prescribed from taking a CARES Act money from the municipalities. They had to get it from Desi. And so we didn't give any of our CARES Act money to the regional school district this year. And I believe Wenham did not either, because actually the predecessor who had highlighted that for them when they asked for the third time, and your predecessor, Tom, had actually highlighted the point from DLS and said, here, we can't give it to you. Please stop asking.
Mm-hmm.
So Jamie, you said that they did get some separate funding?
Yeah, from Desi. But I don't know from the Department of education in secondary schools, but I don't know, I'm not sure how it works for regional, but I believe that's where they got money from.
Maybe that's a question we can all ask as well, when we
Monday.
meet with them on Monday afternoon, to
Yep.
see if that
Jim-
carries over,
Yeah,
what it means, how much. I have no sense of that at all.
Jim, if they've gotten any CARES Act relief, it's going to be really recently, because the more recent stimulus packages, they've had more discussions about local school districts getting aid. For example, there was aid where we're going to be having the updated pool testing at the schools, and that's considered part of their stimulus package. But at this point, the towns have not done anything in the direction of the schools, with the exception of some of our CARES Act funding has gone to the PCR testing at the middle school, which
Mhm.
open to district employees and attendees, even if they're not Hamilton Wenham residents. So I don't want to undercut the fact that we haven't used any CARES Act money. Both towns have been contributing to that PCR testing, and we've made that eligible to anyone in the district that's needed it over the last few weeks, as we've been in the red with cases in both communities.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I understand that, right, that's good. But I was just wondering whether any of the CARES Act would offset some of the additional operational costs they've experienced this year, and maybe even going into next year, so.
Only if it went directly to the school district from DESI. We weren't allowed to give them any, so in
Right,
that
right,
regard.
no, I understand that, right, thank you. John, is that,
yeah, I think we can probably move on, Jim.
okay, okay.
Obviously, next step will be the meeting on Monday.
I'm looking at the clock. You want to try to end by 8:30, everybody? It's 22 after.
Yeah, no, I would say that our last topic was talk about regionalization, and it may just make sense to move that to a future joint FinCom meeting. I don't think it's a 5-minute discussion.
I don't think so.
Those tend to be a lot longer discussions, and I think we can certainly have more, fruitful conversation there. But
I'll just say, just very quickly, we've established in Wenham, you have a well-established long-range capital planning subcommittee, right? And we just established part of finance, a very beginning long-range capital planning subcommittee as well. And so we're going to try to begin to incorporate some of our findings and our work this year into 22 or 2023 or beyond. Jackie has been doing some of that work going forward and has a good portion of a 5-year plan in place, if I'm right on that, Jackie. And we also have revolving capital that, like police cruisers and those kinds of things, but we're going to be trying to look at that. The other piece that I think that I just would like to say, we're looking at developing a master plan and potentially funding that going into 22, which would be helpful, I think, in this whole long-range capital planning effort that we're looking at as well. We haven't made any decisions on that, but that's on the table as well.
yeah, no, which is great, and as we did talk, about having Wenham's input into our master planning process.
Yep.
Wenham's going through one as well. I think the timing is really ideal, because
Yes.
so many of the big decisions and big things in the future are going to be probably applying to both towns, because a lot of them are going to involve the school.
Yeah. So to be continued?
Yes, I did see one note from Marissa about, since we were talking about shared programs, ECO. Was there anything on that, Marissa, that's noteworthy compared to prior years? Just before I assume no, it's always just a retiree or a benefits line item. So I don't think we need to go into it.
Yeah, that's correct. It's just a retirement and the insurance piece.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Well, this was extremely productive, and I look forward to future joint meetings. Certainly, we'll have to talk about when it might make sense to do this again.
Yeah.
During the budget cycle, et cetera.
And we'll be together on Monday afternoon.
Yes.
To kind of push that, some of the questions we have, and see where the school budget is at.
Exactly.
So I'll make a motion for the Wenham Finance Committee to adjourn. I hear a second.
Second,
Been seconded. All those in favor of the Wenham Finance Committee adjournment? Hi, Jim.
Hi, Carrie.
I, Susan.
Hi, Alex.
Hi, David.
Okay.
I'll also entertain a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Second.
I heard a second. All in favor?
Dave
Nick Henson,
Wanger,
aye.
Dave Wanger, aye.
Christina Shankargrove, aye.
And John Prulich, aye.
Good night, everyone, and
Good night. Thank
Very
you,
much,
everyone.
everybody.
Good night,
Good
everybody.
night.
Be well.
Thanks, John.
Be well.